everyone, welcome to Draw Anime Academy, and in this session, we are going to be doing another portrait painting, anime style, but in this case, I have a reference here. So in the previous video that I uploaded of the cat girl, the audio was kind of weird because I accidentally pressed something and I didn't realize it, and it was just making my voice fade out, just really quickly, and it was being annoying, and it annoyed me too. So I'm making another video on how I would paint anime characters. Now, the reason why I chose this realistic photo here, this is from a stock image. I think it's from pexels.com, and it's by this person called Masha Reimers. Anyways, I thought that their portrait stuff looked really cool, and it's a stock image, so I can use it. But anyways, so I chose this image because I like the lighting setup, I like the angle of the face, but more so I just wanted the lighting, right? We are going to be doing an anime style drawing, and why did I choose a realistic drawing, or realistic photo? The reason being is because I can easily see the planes of the face, and it's easier to reference that way. So let's go ahead and get started with the sketch. But first of all, I want to draw in the background real quick, or not draw in the background, but paint in the background just by filling in a color. So I'm just going to be doing a brief overview of how you can choose colors by reference. What you can do is try to guess, right? So here we have the color wheel. This is a Coloris add-on that I got in Photoshop. I think it's free. No, it's not free. I think there's like a 14-day trial. But anyways, I love this tool because you can change the hue, saturation, and the overall colors and the brightness really easily. But anyways, I also just like that this is available. Anyways. So the way how I would go about choosing colors is understanding warm and cool spectrums. For instance, I'm going to be using yellow here. So I'm just going to be choosing a bog standard yellow tone. And right now you don't really think anything of this color, it's just yellow. However, what if I told you that there's warm and cool spectrums of yellow? Cool spectrums meaning more towards green. I'm just going to put this over here. Whoa, that's weird. And another towards warm, which is more orange. And then these all have their specific value structures depending on, the hue. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because I know that some people have issues with understanding how color works. And the way I find color to be easier to work with is understanding cool and warm tones, and also light and dark. So some people might think that, color and value are different. Value meaning the black and white spectrum, right? The black and white version, which is just light and shadow like this. However, values and color actually work hand in hand together. The reason why your colors look bad is because your values look bad. And generally, that's a lot of the case. Like I remember when I, started painting, I used to think, if my colors looked good, then everything was going to be fine. Like if I just chose, something like this, and kind of just did whatever, as long as my colors looked fine, without really understanding values, then that's totally fine. That's all I really need to know. But the thing is, when you turn this into black and white, you can barely read this image. Sure, it may look good in color, like somewhat, but the further you go and turn this into value, the more you actually can't really read it. So I'll just give you a little example here. I'm just going to duplicate this, and hopefully I do this in the right way that doesn't sabotage my lesson here. But anyways, so let's say if I were to this is just purely color. I just picked whatever color that looked good, and that was it. However, what if instead I made sure to lighten some areas, right? I made this value lighter. I made this value darker. A little bit more saturated. For this value here, what if I made this brighter in saturation towards the front and lighter towards the top, as if there was light hitting it. And then let's put a shadow underneath. And, I'm choosing colors based on my warm and cools here. But as long as the values are different enough, then it should be fine. This is just really quick. So, okay, now we have a little bit of a value change. Let's turn this one into black and white. Actually, let's turn both of these into black and white. So as you can see here, you see a big difference. You have value change in this one. You can actually read the image better than one with just color. So if I were to put this back to color, that's wrong, I shouldn't have done that. Then you can see the clear difference between the two. So it's not just about color, you also need to make sure that your values look okay so that your image looks good in the end, because that's just one of the misconceptions. You need value and color, but most of all you need to understand how values work in your image so that it actually reads well. And this is what I will be going over in this video here. So anyways, hopefully that made sense. So it can be kind of hard to explain. Oh, come on. It can be hard to explain, especially, to beginner, because, color is relative, which is very difficult. But all you really need to understand is your reference, how the colors interact with each other, what is cool, what is warm, what color is bouncing off of, what color is bouncing off in the environment, and you're pretty much good to go. So I'm just going to be sketching in this brown tone here, just because it's probably easier for me to transition into paint. So I'm just going to be doing a 3/4 character. I'm going to be doing another cat girl because why not? And I'm also just going to be doing one of my characters that I made from D&D in a D&D session. Her name's Uwu, like this, and her last name is Mew. And she was basically just a meme character, honestly. She was just dumb. But anyways, but she had very cute features. So let's see here. I want to make it a little bit different than my previous one. Maybe just a slightly different angle. Maybe in a more straightforward angle, but slightly turned. And by the way, have your target standard ready. Meaning pick a piece that you really like, that you want to root the quality of. In fact, I should actually just go ahead and do that right now. I will probably put it off screen just because it's not mine. And yeah, anyways, I will be right back real quick. Okay, I'm back. So target standard is really good when it comes to just overall quality. And I really suggest that when you draw, just have that by you so that you can be like, how does my art compare to this professional? And that will help your artwork skyrocket a lot, because a lot of time when you're unexperienced, you don't really know what's good or bad. You just kind of base your opinion on what you see, and if you think that's okay, then that's okay. Or if you have people around you that are worse than you, and you're the better one of the group, then you might have a false sense of ego. This is just to put it bluntly. So I suggest that if you really want to get good, have a target standard. Could be any professional artist. Look on Pixiv, look on ArtStation, and compare yourself. Be brutally honest with yourself, and you'll see that you're like, my art's not good unless it gets to that quality, or my art's, needs work on this and that. Like, if you're struggling with something, that's a good thing. Anyways, enough talking. I'm trying to draw here, and I keep talking. I'm going to tilt her head more. In this case, I'm actually going to push out her cheek a little bit more. I just want to go for more of like a over-the-shoulder look here. Dropping her neck. And I'm going to just start drawing. So I'm just going to map out my eyes. Based on my target standard, I like that style that I did, or that I chose. So I'm just going to go with something based on that, but, with something that I like, kind of just in the end. In the end, when you're doing like a target standard, studying the style is also really important. How does the person color or paint eyes? How do they, stylize their drawing? Right? You're not exactly copying the style of the artist, you're studying it. So meaning you have like your own way of interpreting their way of doing things. And then you basically just kind of do your own spin. So that's how I would go about studying people's art. You don't exactly copy the drawing. You take aspects of what you like and apply it to your own work. and then nobody will know. I'm kidding. But this also includes, foundation, right? When your drawing becomes a lot better, you start understanding how other people do it. So you can reverse engineer your drawing. So here, I want her nose to be more towards her right eye. This is the right, this is the left, it's flipped. So one thing that's confusing to beginners at first is like, oh, why are you calling this the left eye and this is the right when this is on the left? It's because when you flip to her angle or to her perspective, this is the left eye and this is the right eye. It's reversed. I'm gonna make her smile because she's that kind of like that bubbly character. And then I'm going to be drawing in her hair. Once again, just layering on top. Just being very loose with it. You don't want to, when you're drawing, you don't want to go super tight and press really hard because that makes a very tight and stiff drawing. You want to understand, or you just want to draw loosely. And you can see here that I'm overlapping these strands here just to show more depth. Not only that, but doing a style study or doing a target standard also helps you to understand how other artists style their hair, and when you do the same thing or try to emulate what they do, your artwork becomes a lot better. As I mentioned before, I can't recommend doing style studies enough. It's what helped me a lot when I did my anime drawings. Like, I used to not work with a reference, or I used to not work with a target standard, and now I do all the time because I want to make sure that my quality is good. And I'm going to repeat myself a lot. So anyways, her hair is going to be in the wind. I'm going to make this smaller so I can draw in her ears. And she's going to have a pigtail because she actually does have a pigtail in her design. So notice when I keep everything loose, everything looks has a lot of energy to it. She has kind of like fluffy, wavy hair, so I'm going to make it kind of bouncy, which will make it more fun to paint anyway. I don't remember if she had I know she had slit eyes. I don't know if she had any whiskers, but I might as well add some whiskers because why not? She had a collar as well that had a bit of fluff, but I think I'm just going to give her a collar that's just normal. Here, I want to include scapula. And let's actually include a little bit of hands because what's a portrait without hands? I like adding hands. And let's give her some paws because she had paws in her design. So the good thing about drawing is that you can basically do whatever you want. In her outfit design, she had like a crop top, but no sleeves. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of that fluff in her design. I still want to add, I want to give an excuse to add in some hand here. So let's do the paw over here. That'll give some good lesson on how to imply texture. Do cats' paws have 4 or 5 digits? I know that there's a thumb underneath, but because this is a girl, I'm just gonna because this is kind of like a half human character, I'm just gonna do it based off of kind of how human hands work. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm actually happy with how this turned out, actually. Really helps with the style study. Anyways, then what we can do is we can color in the background. So if you want to make a background that is similar to your reference, go ahead and do that. In fact, that would actually be a lot easier to draw and color pick. But anyways, so I'm going to be choosing my color here. So I'm going to, guess based on my eyes, no color picking, if this is a warm or cool tone. Here, this is quite, I would say it's quite more on the orange side. So, and it's also medium tone. So I'm going to fill that in and compare. Now, it's okay to, miss it. It's totally fine. Sometimes you kind of have to guess, like this is closer. You can see that they start matching up a little bit better. So I'm just going to use this as a base. And then what I'm going to do is I am basically just going to apply my lights and darks. But first I have to color in the base local value of her hair and everything else. So she's blonde. And in this kind of lighting scenario, her hair would actually be quite warm. You don't want to add a cool toned hairstyle or hair color if it's a warm color, right? You want to make sure that your light, your drawing is interacting with the background. And that's why I also suggest having a toned background so it actually matches pretty well. So I'm going to be using kind of a cooler variation of this color. It's going to be more, towards yellow, towards green, just to give it a little bit of a different taste or flavor in the illustration. And I'm just lightly washing on top. This is just going to be the same process as I did before. And I'm even debating if I should just finish it in one go. But anyways. Here, I'm just going to be adding, her hair is actually a lot more yellow than this, so I'm just going to be adding another wash of a more saturated orange for this. And I'm using a kind of like a soft opacity, soft round brush here. And that's good. Now her skin, this depends on how strong the light is. In this case, I'm not going to make it very dark or dim. I'm just going to use this as a reference here. So I'm going to make her skin tone close to hers, and it's going to be more warm, so more leaning towards yellow. And having a background as well underneath also helps with color relativity, because when you don't have that, then things start becoming a little bit weird. So right now, everything looks very orange, and I don't want that. So I'm going to go for more of everything looks kind of like the same color, so I'm going to change the skin tone a little bit more here, change it more to kind of like an orangish tone here, just so it's different. So that's looking good. Her paws are going to be a darker tone. In fact, that's actually a good color. I should have used that for her hair here, but I think I'll just wash it in just because I want to use that later on. So overlapping colors as well helps with making it more interesting. You don't want to just start with one color and then stick with that. You can also overlap colors, and that will help with your drawing a lot. Her fur is going to be white, but it's not going to be completely white. In fact, it's going to be more close to this cream white because it's a warm tone. So you don't want to choose pure white because that's too cool. You also don't want to choose, a cool tone like this in this kind of image here. So a lot of it is just understanding how the light works and also how your image looks. All right, so we have the base colors here now. Now let's add in our shadows. And we're going to just be doing it based off of this image here. We see that the light, and if it actually helps, it's probably better to actually mark out where the light is. The light is coming from her front, like that, or more towards the side actually, so it's more like this, where the arrow, the rounded arrow is facing towards us. And then we can start adding shadows. So shadows will be more saturated, and also, depending if you want it to be more dynamic, a different tone. So for instance, if I were to choose the same tone and just drop it down, it will look very boring. However, if I were to change the tone to a cooler tone compared to this yellow tone here, and use that as a shadow, then it becomes a lot brighter and also more vibrant. And this side is going to be in shadow because the light is coming from her right. So here will be in shadow, here will be in shadow, And here will be mostly in shadow. You can already tell that once you have it blocked in, everything looks pretty good. For her, there'll also be some warmer, cooler shadows in comparison to her hair as well. But I would actually go for more of like a desaturated, let me see here. I would go for more of like a desaturated look. I have to kind of zoom out and see. So right now her hair is quite bright. If I were to go cooler and go for more towards like a desaturated color, it would look more like this, but I'm not very happy with how that looks. I would go for more saturated. And that's actually looking better. And in this case, here would be mostly in shadow. This part of her head would be mostly in shadow. Same here on the inner corners, while this side remains more in light. You see how that looks? Looking pretty good. Here we can add a hotter shadow, or it's not shadow, hotter light that is more bright and actually a little bit cooler, just for some contrast. Now for the shadow, let's go a bit warmer. Because this is a cool light, warm shadow, the lights will be cooler in comparison to the, wait a second, I messed up there. The light is warm, shadows are cool. Sorry about that. Sometimes you can invert them. But in this case, you know, kind of like a more leaning towards yellow tone would be more preferable for this paw here, because the base color of this is already quite warm. So I wanted to kind of contrast it. So this just depends on the color that you choose. I know color is relative and it's confusing, but the more you practice and the more you spot, you know, differences in the image, looks better. Here, I'm not going to be choosing, you know, her band here is actually more turquoise, but instead I'm going to go more greenish or more bluish, sorry, and also a little bit more saturated. And because this is an opacity brush here, it's going to blend in with the other colors, so I already had my work done for me, so it's now more of a greenish tone. Her eyes are green, and the light is warm, so I'm going to choose a more of a, actually no, her eyes are teal, never mind. So I'm still going to be choosing a warmer tone here for the green. It's going to be more like this. So now for blue, this is where it gets confusing. When it goes more towards green, it gets cooler. When it goes more towards purple, it gets warmer. But in this case, I'm just going to go for more of like an in-between color. Like that. And then as it gets into shadow, I'm going to go for more like warmer tones of shadow, because this already starts off as pretty cool. You kind of just want to reverse it depending on the situation. Not everything will be cool and warm, or warm and cool dynamic. Things will change depending on the value of your drawing. Anyways, now let's go ahead and color in the whites of the eyes just really quick. I'm using a warmer or more yellowish tone of white, as you can see here. Like so. Her teeth will not be white. It would actually be more gray, but a warm gray. And of course, if you want, you can even add a little bit of the inside of the mouth. That'll be a lot nicer. So now let's kind of check the values right now. I'm pretty sure that these values will actually be quite muddy right now, just because I'm putting in the basic colors, but let's check. So it's not too bad. You can still read a bit. You know, you can see that there's clear light and shadow going on, but once again, this is just a wash. We're using this as a base. So we're going to be darkening and all that stuff in a bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate my line work, and I'm going to be lowering the opacity of this drawing. Actually, no, I'm going to have it stay the same. And I'm going to merge this. The reason I do this is because it forces me to paint over the drawing. And yeah. So let's go ahead and get started with the skin. I like starting off with the skin because it's just easier that way for me. And I'm going to be choosing, or I'm just going to be starting to paint in areas of light first. Just because it's good. Actually, let me think. The shadow and the light's already painted. I might as well just start kind of refining things. So I'm going to start off with the shadow first. So for the shadow, there's something called a core shadow, which is basically the darkest shadow, and it's basically the transition between light and dark. Generally, it will just be kind of like the transitionary period, and then it falls off to a halftone. So I'm going to do a little mini lesson here. If I had a sphere, that's a midtone for now, the core is going to be where the shadow starts, and it's going to be pretty much the darkest area. However, when it gets to the shadow side, it turns into kind of like a halftone. And especially if you have bounce light coming in, then there'll be a bounce coming at the end from the floor. There'll be a shadow here. And then for the light, here would be a lighter tone, lighter halftone, then a light tone, and then finally a highlight. So Colton goes over this more in depth in his other courses, but this is just a very quick overview. And that's basically what I will be applying in this lecture. So here I have a core, and I'm just going to be marking out all the cores here. And I'm going to be making this quite saturated because of the kind of what I mentioned in the other video. I'm going to be basically including the subsurface scattering. So any area that has the transition here is going to be in, I'm just going to put a core in there, and it will make it look more 3D that way. And it can be very subtle. And when you know the planes of the face for anime characters and realistic characters, you can see that there's also like a little dip going to the chin. And one more little mini lesson. This is basically the silhouette of what an anime head looks like in a like just what the center line looks like. So you have the round form, curved form from the nose. Then the mouth goes in a circular, or kind of like kind of bumps out like an orb. If that makes sense. Like there's like a circular area around the mouth, and the mouth kind of hovers over that. And then there's a dip to show the end of the end of the lip, and then the chin comes outward. So you basically want to paint based off of that form. And when you're painting people, it's a lot easier that way. Anyways, I'm going to choose a cooler shadow, or kind of like a more pinkish shadow for her here to make it look nicer, because I don't want everything to be the same hue or the same color or tone. Here, core, right? I'm just toning in the shadow here a bit more. We would see some shadow coming down the neck, because that's in the shadow side. We don't see light coming through here. We will see some shadow or ambient occlusion around the corner of the arms, or the inner corner, or the crease of the arm. Same with the scapula. And in this case, this is kind of where you can start deviating a little bit from the original light source. So this is what's called ambient occlusion, not ambient occlusion, lighting of incidence. When you have a light and shadow side, then you can kind of cheat it a little bit by putting shadows that go away from you. So for instance, you can have a directional lighting, like a main directional lighting, but then when you go into the shadow side, you can kind of cheat it a little bit by putting in lighting of incidence, which is basically wherever your eye is, that's where the light source is. So if my eye is coming in front, this would be the highlight, and everything that goes away from it is in shadow, or transitions into shadow. So that's what I'm going to be doing on her back. I'm looking towards her back here. Anything that's going away from us will be in shadow. Right? Same with anything that's kind of like overlapping will be in shadow. And then you're pretty much good to go. That's how you can cheat it a little bit. So right now, things look pretty messy, but that's okay. Let's do the highlights here. The highlights will be quite bright, just because, and quite saturated because it's skin. also just kind of depends on your light. But there's also going to be some shadow underneath the hair here and the brow ridge. So I'm just going to be adding a bit of that. I'm going to make the highlight of the face a lot brighter in comparison to the shadow side because I want there to be that pop of value. So as you can see, I brightened it up a lot more, and now you can easily see the character. Here, add a little bit of that rim light coming from this side of the image. Using that same tone, you're good. So let's turn this into black and white by lowering the saturation. You can see, there's a clear definition of light and shadow. In fact, I would go ahead and intensify this even more, but I'll do that in the last steps. Well, I'm already 33 minutes in. That's not good. Okay, so now let's get on to the hair. Actually, let's get on to the eyes. So in this case, her eyes are teal. The shadow of her eyes, I want to be warmer, or not warmer, but more blue, because I want there to be a difference in tone or in warmth. Because if I use the same or a tone that's too close, it will look a little bit weird. So here, the highlights coming from this side. I'm going to make the highlight more yellowish in tone. And it's going to be towards the side here. And once again, I mentioned earlier how that would affect the color of the eye. This would basically be a lot more hot towards the opposite side here. As you can see, the more saturation and brighter it is down here, it looks like it's really juicy. Let's add some more darks around the eyes, especially around the highlights, because that's generally where the most amount of contrast is, and then everything else can basically fall into like a halftone. Here I like to accentuate the eyes here. Actually, I forgot that she had slit eyes, but whatever, I'm just going to keep it round, because why not? Here's the transitionary period. I'm going to turn it to more of a greenish tone along the middle, just to show a bit of that transition. If you want, you can even color in the pattern of the eye. And just because I can, you can add a little bit of highlights towards the edges of the eye here, or the pupil. Then, of course, we're going to be coloring in the whites of the eyes. Generally, the light side will typically be brighter in value than the dark side, so keep light and dark pretty different. For instance, on the dark side, it would not get to this this level of brightness because that doesn't really make sense. The light it's in the shadow side, so keep that side darker. It's the same thing on this side here. If I were to color pick, this is brighter than this. Here, as you can see, my color wheel. If I color pick the light parts of the sclera, or the whites of the eyes, and I did the same thing here, there's a slight change of value, and that's because this is on the shadow side with a little hint of light coming through. Basically, it's the same concept here. Light, not as light. Then the shadow side would also basically be the same thing. I'm going to be using a warmer tone here. As you can see, it's starting to look a lot better. Alright, so now let's kind of just start outlining the eye a little bit more, painting it out, making it kind of like a solid color because I want to do that. Here, I'm just painting it over real quick. Nothing really special here. And the reason why I do this is just because I want to pop out the eyes a little bit more in the painting. So let's turn this into black and white again. Kind of, routinely check for your values. Now let's go on to the hair. So the hair, I'm going to be starting light for now, just because it's easier to kind of transition, because she's a blonde, right? When you start off with light, it's easier to kind of already have the darks be done for you, especially when you already have all your light and dark setup pretty much figured out. So I would basically plot in my lights. Once again, the light is coming from in this direction, so anywhere that is in this direction is going to be in light, especially when there's curves coming out. I'm going to make it extra yellow here, or kind of more towards greenish yellow, to make the change more intense. And here I'm just blocking it in real quick, kind of using bigger strokes for now, but I'm going to stop my highlights at around this part. Okay, and then just because I can, I want to add a little bit of that light just to pop this hair out, and around the tops as well. You know, you can kind of excuse it by, saying, oh, there's rim light, there's light coming from behind, right? Not only that, but the shadow is not super intense, so it's not going to be completely black. We're still going to be seeing this. Right now, the shadow is quite intense. I'm going to lighten this later on anyways, just because it's better that way, honestly. I want to see everything. I'm going to pop her face out more here, because I want to see that really clear definition of light and dark. So, low saturation, like see right here. If I didn't have that, then it would look kind of flat. Tone it down a bit, just a bit though. Okay, for the shadows, you could basically also use your base color or your colored sketch as shadows. So I'm going to be using a darker brown that's leaning more towards orange. And the more I'm painting this, the more I'm realizing that actually the light, it looks more cool, and the shadows look more warm, but whatever. There's just really no way to completely understand color sometimes. Anyways, so here I'm just adding in all the shadows. I'm using a more redder, or kind of more, yeah, that's a good hue. Kind of like a more reddish hue for the shadows. Even mix it up a little bit. That's a bit too much, so I'm just gonna warm this up a little bit more. Warming it up meaning more towards orange. And that's better. I like the color tones of this, so I'm gonna use that color and basically just paint in the rest. And of course, if you want to, include areas of light to kind of pop out some things, be my guest and do that. So far, this is what it looks like. In fact, it needs to go darker because it honestly needs to. It's because usually there would be like pockets of darker darks, ambient occlusion. So once again, we're just kind of blocking it in. Nothing too serious. Notice how I'm varying my brush strokes. Like I'm, in some areas I'm putting in a darker, or not darker, smaller strokes for details, and for overall, for an overall, wash, I'm using big brushes. So far, so good. Her eyebrows will be quite dark, so I'm just going to be painting that in right here. And I'm going to be adding some shadows underneath where the bangs are. Just to separate it out. And all, the meanwhile, I'm basically just coloring out all of the lines, or trying to at least. Once again, very rough, but gets the job done here. This is a pink tone for her ears. This will also have some subsurface scattering, so I'm going to intensify the red and also lightening it. Add a little bit of yellow and warmth to show that subsurface scattering, and a little bit more orange, like so. For her, the fur, I'm just going to keep it pretty light. It's going to be quite bright, especially along this side here because it's in light. Same here, but as it gets closer towards the bottom, it gets more in shadow. Here, I'm going to add some shadows in the ears, and then we are good to go. So once we have all the base values ready, we can basically just start detailing. Oh, I forgot to add in the paws underneath, paw pads. So it'll be kind of like a rosy color here for now. All right, so now that we have most of our colors in place, we can kind of do a little bit of, color balance just to make it a little bit more interesting. I think the warmer it is, the prettier it is, honestly. So I'm leaning more towards red. Maybe something like that would be good. It's good for our character. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start softening some areas. I'm going to be adjusting parts, right? I'm going to be taking a soft brush now, and I'm basically going to be blending in these shadows because it's quite harsh, and I'm also going to be lightening all this a little bit better. In fact, I'm going to continue to use this brush here because I like it. I'm taking this, this light wash and then just pressing very lightly here. As you can see, it's not super dark anymore. It's more like subtle light. If you want to add some more subsurface scattering, take this really intense red and basically just, or orange, basically just put in that bit of area around, a little bit of like a line around the core, in between the core and the light. I'm going to take a very bright color. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to paint in this light side of her nose. And blend it in. It should be more like an oval here. This actually looks kind of weird, so I'm not going to do that. I was initially going to do that, but then I'm like, nah, I'm not going to. Let's see here. Instead, I'm going to do, so I like this bright color here. I'm going to paint in the bridge of her nose, kind of just to imply the shape of it. So if her nose is here, here's the bridge of the nose, and here's the light kind of coming through based on the light. So if I were to show you what the cross-section looks like, or kind of like what the forms look like on her face, the cheeks would puff out, the nose would basically be a bump, and then here's the rest of her cheeks coming out like that. So basically the light would be in an area where the bridge of the nose is at. I'm going to be making it extra light here. I'm not going to make it too light, just bright enough. I'm just going to be hinting at it. So in the meantime, implying in the lips, coming out, and lips being pushed out on the bottom lip as well. So notice how it's very form-based, and if you understand if you understand basic human proportion of the face, it becomes a lot easier that way to do that. Here, lightening this up more, keeping this part simple because we don't want to imply too much detail everywhere. Usually when it comes to like light and shadow, you have to pick if the part in light is going to be more detailed than the shadow, or if the shadow side is going to be more detailed. In this case, I want her to be more in detail towards the shadow side, and towards the light side it's going to be less detailed. And that's just what keeps it more balanced anyways. Like so. So far so good. I may just end up removing this area because it just looks a bit like kind of weird. So I'm going to take this out for now and see how that looks. This might actually take a while. So right now, kind of looks a bit boring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to soften the transition here. And then I'm going to put in that light because I really like that area. It's kind of like a way to show form. I will have to kind of play around with this a little bit more. I think it was better before, so I'm going to change it back. There, I think that's better now. Kind of rolls over better instead of it feeling kind of like a weird area. I'm going to just soften some of this area here so it looks a bit better. Yeah, I think that transition's better now. If you want to add, imply lips, you can basically just color in a rose, kind of like a darker red tone along the lips. And then just blend it in with the rest of the skin tone. And usually the corners of the mouth are a lot darker. So just apply that. And you want to color in the inside of the mouth. This is a tongue. Oh, I forgot to give her a little bit of a canine or canine tooth. That's cute. Once again, kind of imply more transition with the subsurface scattering along the edges here of the core. That just makes it look better. How long am I doing this now? Almost 40 minutes now? Anyways, that's not too bad, and I'm liking this one better anyways. So far we have, a face that's pretty much done, almost done. Here, apply that light area, keeping it pretty flat because it's simple. And then as it gets to the shadow, the core can imply some muscle. So here's the deltoid coming through. If you want, you can just keep it pretty simple, but for now, I'm just going to imply the deltoid there. And then to transition between the two, add in that bit of saturated tone for subsurface scattering. Look at that, looks pretty good. Because this is a form that's going in space, I want to imply a little bit more of the deltoid here. Rather than just having it be like a straight line, I want to vary the thickness of this form. So I'm just going to move it around, and I think that looks better. When in doubt, I'm just going to warp this a bit more. There. And then repaint in the empty areas. So the good thing about painting is that it's very versatile. It's not, you can just kind of just paint over all your mistakes when you're thinking about it, right? You don't have to worry about the drawing. You can just paint over it. Here, I'm adding a little bit of that flesh. I'm adding a little bit of squish in this area because generally this would have a bit of a squish towards where the arm bends, but I would make it very subtle. As it goes away from me, I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow there too. So here, I'm going to imply a little bit of light along the scapula just to pop it out more. It's in the shadow side, but once again, I kind of want to add more depth. So anything that goes away from us, like the cylinder here for the arm, I'm going to add a little bit of value. Same here as well. So here is kind of like I'm going to imply the spine here and paint out this area. The good thing about using colored line work is that you can use the colors of the line work in your painting. Here we can see a little bit of that trapezius or that thoracic spine here, and then we can just shade that in, and also shade in areas as it goes downward. That's looking pretty good. I'm happy with how this is turning out so far. Here, paint out this fur. There would generally be a shadow on this fur actually because the paw is coming out. So I'm just going to use a darker value for that. Gray is also a great way, gray is also a good way to show coolness and warmness because gray is a very neutral color. Depending on the situation, it can look cool or warm, right? So like, let's say if I have a very warm background, but I used gray, this looks like a violet color, but it's not. It's just gray, and it looks warmer. So, or if you want, you can use, yellow, and then go to gray. It looks cooler. Anyways, that's just one of the things that I find very interesting about gray. I'm going to add a little bit of light coming up here. I think that'll be good enough. And of course, adding some more shadow down here. Here we can roll the form away from us. And make sure that this white fluff doesn't get too dark if you're doing the same thing. Because white doesn't get that dark. It doesn't really, at most it would go towards half, like to kind of like a 50% gray, and that's it. But it wouldn't go any darker than that because it's white. It's a local value. So far, so good. I'm going to erase this area here just to make the cylinder like more clean cut. I'm going to imply a little bit of that deltoid by wrapping my strokes around the cylinder. Look how much more impactful that looks. Looks more muscular. But, then I'm going to go in and use straighter strokes just to kind of tone it down a bit more. Then I'm going to go into the hair. Actually, I want to add a little bit of her whiskers. And the whiskers on this side will be lighter. It's again because it's on the light side. I'm also going to add some more darker bits around her eyelid. That's looking good. I'm going to add a little bit of a light area around this part of the eyelid because that is in light. I'm still using relatively, large strokes. I'm not, going to detail and making it like super tiny. This is still in the prepping phase. So now I can go ahead and take this kind of dark tone and start implying details in the hair. I'm going to paint out all these lines here and just use these values as is. Once again, have your target standard ready and see how they render hair. See how, how do they separate out values in the hair, right? How do they, do they make the forms smooth? Do they make the, do they color individual strands, right? See that as this form gets closer to her face, it starts going more into shadow. And I'm still keeping in mind of my reference here because, basically my lighting is based off of this reference. I'm going to be using this brush here because it's a little bit sharper and I like to deal with hair ends with this brush. I'm going to add overlaps, so generally the shadow would be going this way. Using these values to basically carve out some shapes as well. Basically take place of my line work. So let's actually turn this black and white just to check the values. Looking pretty good. You can definitely see a lot clearer of a difference. So I'm going to add a little bit of shadow where the fur is just to separate out that value as well. So what I like about this brush is that I can go, big and then small and kind of just clean up some areas. And think of hair as form, right? Think of hair as like 3D shapes and just kind of planes, and generally that would actually make it a lot easier to paint, right? There's always a top side and an underside. And the underside is usually the one in shadow, unless there's like highlights coming out of it. And then there's always highlights on top of like the lighter areas, right? There's always a bit of a value structure going on. So colors are also really dependent on values as well because, every part of what you're painting has its own value system, right? No value is going to be the same for whatever part you're painting. And generally, there will be there will be a light, a dark, a highlight, and a really, really dark shadow. But they all vary in values. And you have to really control the range of it, right? You have to be very controlled in how you paint it because, one side can be, like for instance, I'm just gonna draw this here. Like if you have a dark material, like let's say if you have like a dark environment, you have to keep your value ranges within this dark environment, and it will be a very limited, value, rather than, going all the way up and then all the way down. This will be very controlled. So that just think of that the same way when you're coloring or when you're painting. When you're painting areas of light or areas of dark, keep it controlled, because if you don't, then things will look muddy. And right now, I think there is a little bit of that muddiness going on, but that's just because I'm not done yet. What I should do is I should just put a black and white filter on top. Black and white. There it goes. And I'm going to turn this on and off so I can just check it. But notice that the values of each component is a little bit different. And that's really important. So for visibility. Here, this is going to be mostly dark. With a little bit of bounce light coming from the bottom, from the skin. I like making YouTube videos because I can basically explain everything that I have in one video, and then I can always just refer that to students because when I make a Udemy course, sometimes it just takes forever to make the whole thing, and I just, want to teach just one specific thing, and I can't. But with YouTube, I can basically just make whatever video I want. Once again, if there's overlaps, add a shadow underneath to pop it out. Right? If you have extra strands that come out, add a shadow underneath. And that will basically make your volumes feel a lot better. Paint out the lines. If anything, just use these lines as kind of like values. Here would be in shadow. I think she has like tufts in her, like value, like a different value to her, the tips of her ears as well. So I'm just going to imply that. I'm going to be using this white here. Actually, I'm going to be using a more milder tone. And if your values are good, you can basically just start picking and color picking other values that you already chose for yourself. So you don't always have to pick things from scratch. Painting out these lines here. And this video actually might be a little bit longer than my previous one because I'm kind of going a little bit more detailed in this. So guys, watch this one instead of the other one. Instead of the other bad quality one. Here I'm using values to add in details to the hair, right? I'm adding shapes to my shadows that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to do with my line work. And that's what I really like about painting, is that you can basically just add additional details. Oh, I totally forgot. She actually doesn't have human ears. I just added that out of instinct. So I will go ahead and take that out. Let me paint that out. And then I'm going to wrap this up pretty soon because it's getting pretty long. That's good enough for now. I'm just going to keep everything within the same level. Keep it consistent. Here it's going to be in shadow. It's probably going to be a little bit of bounce light, so I'm just going to make this a little bit lighter, but not as light as the light side. Color on the paw real quick, using these kind of same colors. Just going to be painting in the paws. Add a little bit of highlight. And that looks pretty good. For the claws, I'm going to keep it pretty bright. And not too metallic, because it's not metallic, it's more like calcium. So that's looking good for now. And then since I already pretty much polished everything to a certain level, I think I'm just gonna leave it at that. Forgot to add a little bit of a claw right here. There. And finally for the hair, I'm just gonna be coloring this all in. There's a dark side, there's the underside here. I'm also going to saturate it a little bit more here as well. Keep this dark side. Good. Paint out the lines. Add a little bit of light around the border just to imply a little bit of bounce light or some rim light. Erase some of this out because we don't need it that much hair. And just because I can, I'm going to add a little bit of change in the silhouette by erasing out some parts of the hair and breaking it up. And because I can, I'm going to add a little bit more yellow towards the top. And that looks good. Alright, so that is pretty much it for this video. Hopefully that this helped a lot in your painting process, or if you want to learn how to paint. Let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.